For this video, we'll be talking about developmental issues, and the aim of this video is to equip you with descriptors, quantifiers, or qualifiers that can help you describe and categorize developmental theories and concepts. Hopefully, as we discuss theories and concepts across our course, we can refer to these developmental issues to explain the nature of development that is focused on in each of them. To set an overview, we have these three developmental issues. The first is nature and nurture, the second is stability and change, and the third is continuity and discontinuity. So these descriptors are good anchors to have moving forward in our course in allowing you to categorize and standardize the language that you will use in talking about the theories and concepts. So to guide you in your understanding, in digesting and applying these in the future, here are some guide questions to keep in mind. The first is, how can knowing these developmental issues inform your way of understanding developmental concepts and theories? And given the pairings posed by these issues, what kind of correlation or relationship do you think they have? So the first issue is nature-nurture. And this issue looks at the extent to which development is influenced by nature and by nurture. So when we talk about nature, we look at what is biological. So this pertains to the role of heredity in development. So when we talk about nurture, we focus on the external or the environmental experiences. So different schools of thought throughout psychology and with jurists will take on different stances towards the relationship between nature and nurture. Some even questioning the existence of that relationship at all. So understanding the nature-nurture issue can help us standardize the way we evaluate the theories we'll be looking at in this course to allow us to see, where they are in explaining away development across the continuum from nurture-focused to nature-focused. So an example that we can look at for nature is when we look at how brain development dictates the development of the decision-making process of individuals. So depending on which parts of the brain is matured or not, it may dictate the process of making decisions and weighing options. So the question is that, is the emotions part of the brain more developed? Is the most critical or the executive functioning of the brain more developed? So we'll be able to highlight this more when we talk about the role of brain development in adolescent decision-making. So on the other hand, if we focus on nurture and decision-making, we can look at how an adolescent would decide based on their educational background, how they were raised, the values that have been instilled in them, and even the cultural norms that they adhere to. So in this image, just to zoom it in a little bit, we can see that there are biological changes in the brain. And following these are the opportunities to either support or support for possible improvement or intensify a detrimental tendency that we might see in adolescent decision-making. So this image can also bring us to the epigenetic view. So in talking about nature and nurture, research rooted in the epigenetic view has been increasing. So the epigenetic view focuses on the idea that development consists of a continuous bidirectional relationship between genes and the environment. So breaking that down a little bit more, we can see that continuous, but it's not just a one-time event, and bidirectional, meaning that one affects the other. So an example of this could be when we talk about language development. So for nature, the brain and its development has a role in the development of language. So researchers and language scholars have seen that there is some universality in how children acquire language, which provides evidence that language does have a biological basis. So other than this, language is also rooted in particular regions of the brain. And when we are able to develop these areas by talking to children, facilitating their language development by ways of providing opportunities and socialization, that's where nurture comes in. So when we look at the environment of the child, let's say their school, their family, even their culture, which can facilitate language development, And at the same time, looking at the brain development and its capacity for acquiring language and organizing it, we take into the bidirectional relationship between nature and nurture within the context of language development. So the second issue rather is stability and change. And this kind of dynamism focuses on the degree to which early traits and characteristics persist through life, or do they change? So stability, when emphasized in a theory, states that development has a hereditary component. So because of possibly biological traits. An example of this could be temperament as a child. So when we see that a young child is difficult, has a difficult temperament when they are young, when they are older, the tendency for that is that the temperament of an adult person is still difficult as well. And other than heredity, stability may also put into view the strength of influence that early childhood experiences have. So, which will bring in the idea that early childhood experiences can be brought, can show their influences even when the child is already older or even as they are adults. So, all in all, stability takes on this view that what is seen in the younger ages of the child will be seen throughout their life. And on the other hand, when we talk about change, this is when we're able to emphasize that there is a more optimistic view that later experiences can produce change. Looking back at plasticity and development. So in our discussion in the different dimensions of development, that plasticity brings into the idea that across the lifespan of an individual, we can see that there is still a possibility of change. All right. Moving on to the third issue, which is continuity and discontinuity. This focuses on the degree to which development involves either gradual, cumulative change, which is continuous, or distinct stages, so discontinuous. A way to ask is if there were sudden changes, or was it a change that happened gradually or in increments? So going back to our example of language, and development in language can be seen as continuous when an infant is able to say their first word. And looking at that event of them just saying their first word may seem discontinuous or abrupt. If looked at in isolation. So we can think of the experiences of parents finally hearing their child say their first word, no? Daddy, mommy, they get so excited. They think it's a very, very big change. However, when we realize that it happened across the span of incremental changes from just merely cooing, so we'll be talking about this in the coming module, cooing, the oohs and the ahs of babies, to babbling, the ba ba ba, da da da, na na na, and then to short words, to words like cup, more, tummy. We can see a gradual change that took place. So the development of language was actually incremental in that way. And on the other hand, an example for discontinuous change is when we look at the moral reasoning development of an individual. So from just merely using punishments and rewards for doing something to developing the kind of reasoning that behaviors, or moral behaviors rather, are coming out from decisions that are weighing social obligations, social weights of actions, which shows the qualitative or the more discontinuous change rather than a quantitative increase or quantitative change. Moving forward to evaluating these issues, looking at it, we think that there is a dichotomy. However, these can actually propose a way to characterize development throughout the lifespan. And these issues, as I said, they might pose a dichotomy at face value, but in actuality, they have to be viewed in terms of the relationship with each other and how strongly development is influenced by each of these factors. So a good way to see these issues is by characterizing development on a continuum between these two things. We might think they are absolute. However, we should see them as not as a dichotomy to find absolute categories in, but rather as a continuum. Okay. In summary, just to wrap this up now, we have these three developmental issues that hopefully we can use when we are describing the various theories and concepts that we will be going through in this course. So in summary, you have these three. The first is nature and nurture. The second is stability and change. And lastly, you have continuity and discontinuity.